Hey everyone, so I'm here to talk about my September books. I know it's a little late, but you know how life goes. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right in. So for audiobooks, I listened to Love on the Brain, Under One Roof, Carrie Soto is Back, With the Fire on High, Maybe in Another Life. Then, since I have Audible Plus, I listened to The Art of War and The Boys Deeper and Deeper from that. Then, I read The Burning God, which was the end of the Poppy War trilogy, When Women Were Dragons, The Ogress and the Orphans, A Prayer for the Crown Shy, Girl Serpent Thorne, Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too, the first 4 volumes of Call of the Night, first 2 volumes of Catch These Hands, all of Goodnight Pun Pun, and then the Air Gear Omnibuses, the first 6, which covers the first 17 volumes. So Love on the Brain and Under One Roof obviously are both by Ali Hazelwood. She wrote The Love Hypothesis. And I'll be honest, I liked Love on the Brain a lot more than The Love Hypothesis. The Love Hypothesis I felt was a little forced and the characters, were a little immature. I did feel like in Love on the Brain, although there were still some moments that were kind of like, okay, this wouldn't happen in real life, or just way too many coincidences. They weren't as blatant. So I did enjoy that one quite a bit more. And I felt like there weren't as many blatant tropes as well. So then Under One Roof was one of her short stories, and I listened to the other 2 of those this month, October, so I'll speak about them later in my next video. But for Under One Roof, that is the first one of that trilogy, and it follows Mara, and she's left a house. Come to find out, the owner of the house's nephew is also there. They have their differences and wind up together. I thought that was probably the best of the 3 short stories. Again, it was the least contrived, and I felt like they were probably had like the cutest moments of the trilogy. Then we have Carrie Soto is Back. That is another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. And obviously Carrie Soto was mentioned in Malibu Rising. And she is a tennis star. That's all she ever knew. And this basically follows her career and then her coming out of retirement. So, you kind of have the back and forth timeline, as Taylor Jenkins Reid likes to do. And I thought this one was okay. Honestly, I have to say Malibu Rising was probably still one of my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, at least of the recent ones. I have liked the older ones of hers I've read as well. I felt like, honestly, Carrie didn't have a whole lot of depth to her, other than she liked tennis. And, I suppose that's part of the point of the book. It's to show that when your whole life is about this one thing, how much everything else can fall by the wayside. I still did enjoy it. I believe I gave it like a 3.5 stars, so it wasn't bad by any means. It just wasn't what I would normally enjoy. Then I read Maybe in Another Life, also by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this one is, again, a dual timeline, but it comes out of the idea that since time is not linear, but all time has always existed. That, say you flip a coin right now, and it comes up heads. Well, now there's another universe in which that has come up tails. And basically every choice, there's a different universe where a different choice would be made. And so this follows the choice of a woman to either stay at a party or to go home. And I do like the way that many things stay the same, but that certain things change. And I do like that she still winds up meeting all the same people in both timelines, more or less. It's just at a different point in her life. So I did enjoy that. Then there's With the Fire on High, and this is about a half Puerto Rican, half African American girl. She is in her last year of high school, and she has a child, and therefore believes she doesn't necessarily have time to follow her dreams. She loves to cook. She wants to go to culinary school, and I do like how strong Imani is in certain ways, and then, how she has these moments where she is an adult. Like when her and Tyrone, who is her daughter's father, they start having some issues. She tells him, she goes, look, we have a child. No matter how angry we are at each other, we both want to be in her life. So we need to grow up and act like adults. And then there's the other times at that, like how she can't necessarily see her way to going to college, that you do kind of expect of a teenager, and she lives with her grandmother. And I love the relationship that Imani, her grandmother, and Emma, who is her daughter, Imani's daughter, have. I thought it was a really good book, and it did bring up, some issues that are relevant nowadays. Not every teen mother has necessarily chosen this. It's a mistake, and they have to make the best decisions for themselves. So yeah, that was a pretty good book. Then I listened to The Art of War, and this was just The Art of War itself. There was no commentary, and I did find it rather interesting. It has inspired me. I might like to try to find a physical copy of the book and kind of, take notes about certain ways to implement certain things in my life. Because there are some things that are relevant everywhere. Some things are more just for battles. Then we have The Boys, Deeper and Deeper. I enjoyed The Boys comics. I read them about 2 years ago. I've been a fan of the show, and so I saw that. And the Deep is, well, he's not necessarily my favorite character. I don't necessarily dislike any of the characters. They all have both good and bad parts. But I did find that interesting. It was basically done as, in the show it's mentioned that Deep wrote an autobiography, a memoir, and so the premise behind that, this Deeper and Deeper, is that there is a woman who does a podcast about Vought and all the superheroes, and so she invited the Deep and his wife there to speak to her and speak about the book. And so I thought it was fun. The Deep was voiced by the actual actor who plays him, and so the character was very in character, and you get these ads for the Vought amusement park and all other Vought things. So it was a fun addition to the show. I would say if you haven't watched the show, if you've only read the comics, you may not enjoy it as much, but I do think it's still enjoyable for those who have just read the comics. So then I finished The Burning God, which was the last book in the Poppy War trilogy. And of course, I did a whole video about that. So, I did not particularly care for the ending. And I say, watch that video to learn more about that. Then When Women Were Dragons and The Ogress and the Orphans were both by Kelly Barnhill. I started out, I read The Girl Who Drank the Moon and Dreadful Young Ladies and Other Stories, and I enjoyed those, so that's why I picked up these two. When Women Were Dragons is her first full-length adult novel, and it follows a 1950s world where women have turned into dragons, and nobody's exactly sure why. This has tried to be suppressed, and so it follows a young girl whose mother adopted her niece when the main character's aunt had turned into a dragon. And so then it was okay. It's definitely a feminist book, and I don't feel like it was heavy-handed feminism, in the sense of all men are bad. There was good men and there was bad men. And obviously the father in this book was not the best of men, to say the least. But it was just an okay book. I do feel like the dragon lore could have been explored a little more. There was dragons who went into the universe to learn more about astronomy, the stars, other planets. I would have loved to have seen that, but it concentrated on the dragons who came back. And I did like, how they were able to integrate into society and basically help people, and I do think that that's a good message there, that no matter what, people can help people. So I did like that. And then The Ogress and the Orphans was another middle grade book that was rather similar, or had similar themes to The Girl Who Drank the Moon, in that it's kind of a coming of age story, and a story where there is a society in which bad things have happened, and these young adults, I believe most of the children in this story are about 14, and they basically help everything become better, kind of in the same way The Girl Who Drank the Moon did. There's less magic in this one. I would still classify it as magical realism because, there's dragons, there's ogresses, I believe there was ghosts as well, briefly mentioned. And I thought that one had some pretty good world building. And I did enjoy it. I would have liked to know a little bit more about the ogress's previous life. But that one didn't bother me as much because you get enough snippets that you kind of get the idea of that ogress just kind of wander around, settle wherever they feel they're needed, and kind of help out. So I did enjoy that, and the characters were a little either good or bad, but again, middle grade, so that's not too surprising there. But I did enjoy that. And then I read A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is part of the Monk and Robot series. And I just find that series rather, sweet and endearing. Basically, there is this moon that's been terraformed, and this is a far future society in which it's basically a utopia. Um, there is, no discrimination. People are living with nature and only taking what is needed. And like when they develop their houses, they normally, like their tree houses, in some places that they don't destroy the trees, they kind of build them in the trees. And I enjoy seeing, some of the science fiction that's not necessarily about these strange alien races and intergalactic wars and space travel, but just kind of quieter. Uh, this is what things could be. And don't get me wrong, like I do like the space operas, the space explorations, but this was pretty cool as well. And it was kind of one of those where basically robots were created and they became sentient, and because they became sentient, the humans decided, well, we can't really enslave them, so they kind of let them go out to the wilds, and now the robots have decided to try to help humanity. So what does humanity need? And even though, everybody basically has a house, currency is basically PEBs, short for digital pebbles, you find out. And basically, say you need food, that may be 5 PEBs. You don't necessarily have to give that to the farmer. That can go by you basically, okay, you eat this fruit, and now you go help your neighbor fix his roof. So it's kind of like a very community-based thing. And, yeah, so I did enjoy that. I do enjoy that series. And then you have Speckled Mosscap, who is the robot. They choose their name from the first thing they see when they're activated. And I did find the robot lore to be very interesting about how as they break down, they take pieces, whatever piece isn't broken, and build new robots. And the robots kind of keep at least some memories of all the pieces they had. And I feel like as more books come out, she will explore that more. This is by Becky Chambers, so I did enjoy that. Then I read Girl Serpent Thorne, and this is a retelling of a Persian myth in which a princess is cursed to be poisonous to the touch. And so this book follows her mother, her brother, and her best friend and her best friend's brother. And this was a pretty interesting book. It was a little on the short side. I believe it was like 300 pages. And I did feel like a lot of this was kind of the setup of her being locked away and why, and that there wasn't a whole lot of action. But once you got to the action, like, it was very interesting, and I did enjoy the lore. I just felt like it was a little slow-paced. And the cover, I really like the cover. It's very pretty. So yeah, there's that one. And then the last actual book I read was Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Johnny's son. And I found that very cute, and just the simple art style fit very well. And some of the quotes in there, like when the little alien is talking to the dog, "Are you really happy, or do we just see you as happy because we know sadness? Can you know happiness without sadness?" So yeah, I did enjoy that, and the little pictures are really cute. There's some really good quotes, and you have the little talking tree, which kind of reminds me of The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. So yeah, it was a cute little book. It's a good kind of pick-me-up, if you need some, like, inspirational quotes. I feel like you could kind of pick that up and find a bunch. So then for mangas, I read the first 4 volumes of Call of the Night, and I did enjoy this. It is a vampire romantic comedy, I guess would be the easiest way to explain it. It follows a 14-year-old boy who was a perfect student, and eventually he became disillusioned with that, so quit going to school, and then he became an insomniac, and so he decided to wander the city at night. And there is quite a few things that are, basically a love letter to the night, like how different everything looks when it's lit up with, the lights instead of the sun, how quiet it is at night, how everybody is a little more relaxed and kind of in a different mode than during the daytime. I've always been a night owl, and I work overnights. So, I did enjoy that aspect of it. And most of the humor I thought was pretty funny, at least enough to chuckle at. There wasn't any oh my god, I can't stop laughing, this is so great. But it was funny enough. And so basically, like I said, after this boy is wandering, he meets a girl, and she turns out to be a vampire. And so he decides he would like to be a vampire as well. And then it kind of follows him meeting up with the vampire, at each and every night, kind of the hijinks they get into and whatnot. So it's a little bit of a slice of life as well. And then once I got to volume 4, we start to get a little more into the vampire lore. We meet more vampires. We meet vampire hunters. So it seems like as it continues, it will kind of grow the world. I'm definitely interested to see where that goes. Then I read the first 2 volumes of Catch These Hands. That is all that's actually released in America so far. I know the series is only 4 volumes total. The 3rd volume is coming out in either this month or in November. And basically it follows these 2 women who are about 24, 25, and back in high school they were delinquents. Now you have the one girl, she basically chose to be a delinquent. She had always been kind of a tomboy, a fighter, a bruiser, and so she became really strong and would beat up all these other gangs of young kids. Well, not young, but high school kids. This is a very common thing, apparently, back in the early 2000s Japan, which is when that would have taken place. That there were not necessarily gangs, but clubs, and they would brawl. And so she was in that. And then the other girl, she was kind of a goody-goody, but then she was threatened by the delinquents in her school, so she beat them up, and then kind of got a reputation for being super strong. And so these 2 became rivals because their schools were in the same area, so they kind of had to compete to see who's top dog. And in this, the second girl winds up falling for the first girl. So Soramori, who is the second girl, she winds up falling for the other girl and is unable to say it, and that's another reason she continues to fight. And now that they're adults, Soramori is your average, working adult, and the other girl's kind of not necessarily gliding through life, but she's, working part-time jobs, has less of a solid plan. When Soramori basically finds her again, she says, okay, let's fight. If I win, you have to date me. And of course, Soramori wins. So you have these two going out on dates and kind of realizing that, okay, maybe we really do get along. And it's kind of, it's again, slice of life. It's cute. Cute and simple, quick little read. And there are quite a few humorous parts, especially with how awkward Soramori can be. Whenever anything happens, she winds up, getting very tongue-tied, and it can be quite funny. And then I read the Air Gear first 17 volumes, and I did kind of enjoy that. It's slightly dated. I believe it was written back in the early 90s. And it's mostly the art style. Art styles have really changed. And it's about these kids who there is this thing called Air Gear, which is a roller skate that has mechanics in it so that they can kind of jump higher and skate faster and whatnot. And they have these competitions. Basically, they all make groups, and have different names, and they make these little pins and everything. And then they have areas that, like, okay, this group has this area to practice in, and they compete for that. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool. I enjoyed seeing the different tricks, and then they did pretty good about, like, there's different ranks, and the different ranks compete in different ways. We haven't seen the highest two ranks, how they compete. We know what they are, but then the lower ranks, you get to see, like, there's one where they're on platforms, and the platforms collapse. You have to be the last one standing on the last platform. And it's pretty cool to see them all. Then we're starting to get now in volume 17 some backstory on why these were created, how these were created, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes when I continue. I got these through Humble Bundle, which is basically a website that they'll have a group of probably about 100 mangas, and you can donate money to a charity. They do all sorts of different charities, and it's usually, if you donate $1, you get like one manga, and then it goes up to, if you donate this amount, the maximum amount, you get all the mangas. So I've done that a couple times. They normally don't have full series. They did have a few, but it's usually about half the series. So it's enough to get you started to know if you're interested. But yeah, I did enjoy Air Gear, and I look forward to continuing that. And then I read the whole run of Goodnight Pun Pun. And this was a very odd and dark slice of life story. It follows a boy who is mostly drawn as a little bird character, but as you get to certain scenes, you get to see he might actually be human. I'm not entirely sure. You do see a human body. You never see his face, though. And it follows him from 5th grade up until he is about, I believe, 22 or 23. And it follows his group of friends as well. And he kind of crosses and recrosses paths with them. And then you have the girl he's in love with, that she is there from 5th grade in through middle school. Then they go to different high schools. Then they meet up again when they're 20. And that's when it kind of gets a lot darker. And yeah, like I said, it's just kind of odd. There's this random cult that's in there that I believe is supposed to be basically like Heaven's Gate cult. It's something I'll probably have to reread to get the full nuance. But it was one of those that it's like a soap opera almost, that, you can't look away to know like what's gonna happen next, how much worse can it get. But the art in it, like the characters are are very well drawn, and the backgrounds, a lot of the backgrounds are amazing, and like you can really tell that this is like a bustling city. And then there's moments where you get like a starry sky that are quite beautiful. And I think one of my favorite scenes is in one point there's a huge crosswalk. I would say it's something like Times Square in New York would be. And so you have all these people crossing the street, and you can just see like all this life, and you can see how Lone Pun Pun feels. So it is something that I definitely like to revisit, and I did enjoy it despite the darkness. And yeah, so that's all that I read in September, and I'm not sure how big my October reads will be. I am planning to start finally Six Crimson Cranes. I know I said I was debating on that in September, but I got a little sidetracked by other books. But I have decided I'll start that in October. I'm not sure if I'll be able to finish it, but I suppose I'll find out.